Appreciate your patience with getting started. I even thought about, hey, should I get a HDMI to VGA connector? And I did not do that. So, okay, but we're off and running. This is actually a topic that I used as part of my graduate research for Ball State University. I was working on a master's degree in the Department of Political Science. We're going to go through that in just a moment. Here's just an overview real quickly. I really needed to pay attention to time, so here's an overview of, I'm going to give a little bit of information about myself, about the research. I saw from the introduction today that there's folks from over 15 countries represented at the conference. So that being the case, I'd like to provide a little bit of a historical context for anyone who's not familiar with the U.S. government on how the function of Congress works. I'm going to go through that in a very rapid fashion. We're going to look at congressional staffing trends in terms of the data that is associated with the research. I'm going to show you why hierarchy and concentration of positions in Congress is very important in the public relations function of the legislature, and how that compares to the more legislative policy-driven events going on in the halls of Congress. I'm going to try to do a quick data demo within our given time frame using IPython notebooks and pandas, and specifically we'll be looking at positions that are within the roles of congressional staff that specialize in new media in the House of Representatives. So we'll go through that. And finally, I'll wrap up with some suggested readings and research and sources on the topic that you might find interesting and continue to go through. So a little bit about myself. My name is Brian Smith. I'm a graduate student at Ball State. I live in Indianapolis, Indiana. Over on the left, you see is my wife and daughter. We have been married 8.98 years. I could say that because next Wednesday will be our 9th year anniversary. So it's exactly 8.98 today. Next week will be 9. We live in Indianapolis. I actually met my wife at Ball State. She was a speech and language pathologist. So we've kind of, we met and we've been hanging around each other ever since then. And now we've got a carbon copy of ourselves as part of our family. If you don't know anything about Ball State, probably the biggest claim to fame would be David Letterman. He's the host of the late night show. He's actually going to be retiring after a very, very long career in broadcasting. But he's sort of the claim to fame for my alumni. A little bit about this research. There's two pieces of it. So we're going to go through a very quick whirlwind tour of the United States Congress. We're looking at specifically, so there's two pieces of this analysis. We're going to look at congressional staffing functions within Congress. What we're utilizing as our source data are PDF files that are made available through the House of Representatives. Beginning in 2009, any public disbursements that were made for official congressional functions were reported in PDF source through the statement of disbursement. So we're going to take a look at that file itself and utilize Python for the data analysis. Two pieces, again, we're looking at House Statement of Disbursements. Here's some of the tools that I'll be utilizing in order to take a look at the data itself. If you have no familiarity with the U.S. government and coming from internationally, here's just a real quick overview. We're just going to be focusing on the legislature. The legislature makes up one branch of the government along with the executive and the judicial branches. Within the legislature, also known as Congress, there is the Senate and the House. Both houses of Congress are made up of three basic groups. It's a very hierarchical structure within the legislature. What you have is House leadership, which is often identified by the Speaker of the House, who is third in line to the President of the United States in terms of overall constitutional powers. Then on the Senate side, what you have is the Vice President serving in a capacity over the Senate itself. I've got it in parentheses because it's a very informal role that the Constitution sets up for the Vice President in the Senate. But since we're talking mainly about the House of Representatives, the Speaker is the most important in our study. Both houses also have majority and minority leaders, whips, etc., that are attached to the management of both parties within Congress. Below the leadership level, what you have are congressional committees that work on legislation throughout the year. So there are standing committees that look at everything from appropriations, which is how Congress allocates money to public programs. There is a standing committee for Veterans Affairs, for infrastructure, for science, for all the different varieties. We're actually going to go through those in just a moment. You'll get to see some of them within IPython. And finally, there's members of Congress. So this would be if you live in the United States, you're represented by a representative of your district. They serve in the House, and every state in the union also has 2 senators allotted to them. So here's a really quick overview of the legislative process. I just want to give just a kind of a quick introduction. Whether you're looking at the Senate or the House side, either way, a bill is introduced to the body and it moves through committee. And what's important about this slide is you see so much of the legislative process goes on at the committee level. It's important to understand that even though you might think of your representative in the House as being a constituent that can help you with your casework, a lot of the time and the effort that is spent within Congress is specifically at the committee level where legislation is actually made. So just an important thing to note for understanding the legislative process. Let me compare a little bit of the sessions of Congress like over time. So where we might look back to post-World War II era and how Congress looked back then, parties looked much different. They were internally diverse. You don't see what you recognize today as like the polarization into each side. Prior or following World War II, what you find instead is that there was a lot of diversity, so that there were moderates both on the conservative and the liberal wing of the Democratic and the Republican parties. Committees were also functioning in a very different time during that era. Committee chairs were tenured, so depending on how long you sat on a committee, that would determine your rank on the committee. And if you were the most senior member of the committee during that era, you would be the committee chair, and that was a very powerful and a very autonomous position because committee chairs could have more moderate views and not be subject to things going on at the national level. That changed dramatically from 1964 on. Once Medicare was introduced through the legislature, once a lot of the programs under the Great Society were implemented in the late 60s and into the mid-70s, what you saw is Congress began to erode its base of moderates in the middle, and things started to become more polarized. That only sped up as media continued to grow. So where we just had newspaper and radio outlets for a long time as the major source of information for Americans, television began to explode during that time frame. And then obviously in our current era, we've got the internet that has sped things up dramatically. So what you see is this kind of gradual erosion of moderation and this steady rise of polarization. So why would congressional staff matter if that's the case? Well, consider this. The U.S. has a population of over 318 million people. The Senate is made up of 100 senators. The House of Representatives is represented by 435 districts. So when you break down the constituents per senator and per representative, it's not feasible for that one individual to be able to handle any of the constituent casework that goes on, or any of the or any of the routine functions of public office without a supporting staff. Just to give you an idea, the majority of time that senators and representatives use throughout just like a daily schedule, according to the Washington Post, was 4 hours was spent on call time. And when you see call time, no, that means fundraising. So they're like on the phone trying to get money for the next election cycle. 1 to 2 hours was estimated for constituent visits. 2 hours was dedicated to committee and floor work, so that's actually legislative lawmaking as we would understand it. There's an hour also typically found in most schedules that is for strategic outreach, so receiving any groups that travel to Washington and want to meet their representative or senator, those types of things. And then, obviously you need like a break to, grab lunch and coffee and unplug a bit. So that's the typical schedule of a member of Congress. Congressional staff obviously are needed to perform a variety of the work that goes on within the office itself, and so that's where the statement of disbursements really come in handy. So take a look at this chart. This is data that was gathered by 2 sources. The first of which is Vital Statistics on Congress, which is a publication made available through the Brookings Institution and through the American Enterprise Institution. What they've done is they've they've cataloged years and years and years and years of these financial disbursements made by the House of Representatives. And what you can do is take a look at the disbursements made for personnel compensation to see how many people are on the rolls of the staff. And what we find is at the committee level, from 1979 to 2014, there was a huge shift beginning in 1995. The reason why that is if anyone is familiar with a former Speaker of the House by the name of Newt Gingrich, he introduced the Contract to America, which was aimed at one thing was shrinking the size and functions of government. And one of the ways that he was able to deliver on that proposal was to gut committee staffs within Congress. So these are positions that primarily were based around legislative and policy matters, and they were subject to massive cuts in 1995. And so this graph kind of shows you the extent of those cuts over time. So a little bit about the disbursement itself. Again, if you want to access anything prior to 2009, that 2009 forward has been when the House starts publishing them in PDF format. But prior to 2009, you'll want to, I recommend the Vital Statistics on Congress, again, because it gives a lot of that summary data that you might need to tie in prior decades to current disclosure. I would take you through a demo, however, I know we're short on time. So let me jump to a couple more graphs that will illustrate a little bit of what's going on. So within the committees itself, it's important to note, remember in 1995 there was this huge drop-off in the number of people established in committees. Well, if we broke that down, we can actually see within the committees, like how did they change themselves. So what I've got is a time series here of the House committee staff from 1985 up to 2014. And you see right there, beginning in 1995, there was a huge drop-off in certain assigned committee staff, mainly out of the House Administration Committee, which is handles all of the members' representative allowance. So in other words, the pot of money that you get in order to operate your office every year. That was an office that prior to 1995 had over 300 people staffed in it. Or I'm sorry, over 250 people staffed in it. And then after 1995, that committee now is down to maybe about 30, like a staff of 30. So it's dramatically different. And there's been tons of shifting that's gone on since 1995, as you can see. Appropriations historically has been the largest committee that's staffed within the House of Representatives, and that's still the case. So some of the functions that you might find on the committee mainly would be found amongst four basic groups. There's administrative work, so when you think about constituent case work, scheduling, staff assistant work, office management and system administration, that's all more of administrative work. There are a range of supervisory positions that are located within Congress that are found amongst the chief of staff. A lot of the lawyers and advisors to members of Congress themselves, we've classified them under counsel and advisors. If a position was specifically tied to legislative policy, I wanted to make a specific category for them and compare those to press functions. So where you see like the title of a press secretary, which is commonly known, or communications director. Again, that's more of a press function, and we've broken up those titles specifically. We weren't able to go into the demo, but I can give you this summary statistic. Out of the last 5 years of having electronic access to the statement of disbursements out of Congress, I was able to identify over 328,000 personnel compensation records over that time and which offices they were assigned to. And of those positions, there were over, nearly 4,400 unique position titles within the data set. So it was a lot of data to try to pull together and to bring together in something like as simple as a 4-column table for the conference. Okay, I've got a quick 30-second game show, and then we got to go to the last bit. Okay, so the game is called Say What, and if you want to play, like you have to, on the count of 3, you need to give me a say what, and you can say it any way you'd like to. So on the count of 3, if you'd like to play my game, and there's candy involved, on the count of 3, let's get a round of Say What. Ready? 1, 2, 3. How many people went up on that? I think you have to go, say what? All right, so here's a quote. I'd like, for anybody that can give me the name of the person who generated this quote, I'll read it to you. As I told my colleagues, we don't have enough votes to legislate. We are not in the majority. We're not kind of in the minority. We are in a hole. They ought to get the idea out of their minds that they're legislators, but what they can be is communicators. First person to tell me who they think said this. Who said Boehner? You. Would you like Skittles or Reese's Pieces? You don't know. Okay. Will you decide for her? What's she getting? Skittles? Will you? Skittles? All right, here you go. Nice job. Yeah, this was actually a quote made by John Boehner when he was then the minority Speaker of the House. Now he is a minority leader within the House of Representatives. Now he's the Speaker of the House. Just to show you why that was such a kind of impactful statement, prior to him becoming Speaker, there was really just this idea that maybe Congress ought to be making laws. And he says, no, we need to be communicating. That's our primary objective. And you can see that like in the staffing makeup. So in 2014, for instance, leadership offices were made up of 20% were press-related positions. So this is anything from press secretary to communications director, and obviously new media as well. When you compare that to committees or personal representative offices, it's just a much larger concentration within his internal staff on press. So that chart specifically is designed for that. Press and new media, there's a range of titles that you might imagine that are all tied to social media. Here's just a quick look at what is incorporated in whenever I say a new media position. Could be anything from a social media specialist to a web and multimedia coordinator. Those are all like positions, at least within this population, and those are all new media. So if you take a look, this is going to be the last graph I've got, and then we'll move on. This chart actually represents the hierarchy within a typical office of Congress. So what you have is the chief of staff is mainly a supervisory position that manages the internal workflow of a congressional office. From there, you have, based on the average compensation, legislative directors are very well compensated, along with attorneys, press secretaries, staff assistants. You see new media here amongst leadership actually is paid much higher on average than similar positions in committees and in personal offices. So this is kind of like the aha moment of, what's going on with all these press functions, and why is my representative getting on Twitter and trying to communicate with me. They're spending a lot of money specifically for this specialty of new media in the leadership realm compared to committees and to personal offices. Here's kind of an overlay of that last graph. So if you want to say, well, which position was a media position, which position was a legislative position, this graph gives that same overlay, just to give an idea. Okay, so in conclusion, we've taken a look at some related academic literature on Congress in order to really get our heads around the data used for the study. We're looking at congressional disclosures out of the House in order to identify where these positions were and what the concentration of staff looked like. We built time series analysis in Python. I apologize, I couldn't go into the data demo for the sake of time. But basically, we were using PDF formats from 2009 forward, and then what we did is just butted up the data from the Vital Statistics of Congress, which was made available through the Brookings Institution. So it gives us like a full range of what was going on. So the findings that we found were that press and new media compensation were reported higher on average amongst leadership offices when you compared other legislative groups like committees and personal offices. There's other information that's available in the House of Representatives. We only looked at a small portion. Some of the things that are there are vendor payments, supplies, official travel expenses are also made available through the statement of disbursements. I've got a full paper if you want to kind of get an idea of what else is out there. And here's some suggested readings, studies, and resources if you're just interested in the topic. Again, Vital Statistics was extremely helpful to this study. There's a book that was written by my department chair called The Public Congress. It looks at how media has transformed the legislature over time using basically from the end of World War II all the way up to the modern time. So. With that, I'd like to thank you for your attendance and your interest in the topic. I don't know if we have any time for, no time for questions. So if you'd like to see me afterwards, please do so in the back.
But
thank you.
I would like to encourage and offer Brian to submit to Lightning Talks to be able to do the demo portion.
Oh, right on, yeah.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Give Brian